Good morning, friends, and welcome to the Avenue Uniting Church in Blackburn, Victoria, meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. My name's Rod Peppiatt. Before I step into the picture, I just mentioned to you that as you can see this morning, in a little while, our community will gather for worship and Holy Communion, and the bread and the wine will be placed on the table that you can see with the white cloth, rather than the more normal communion table at the back. You'll also perhaps see that there are some music stands behind that table, and we will be led in music not only by our organ, but also by a group of young musicians who gather with us each month to bring different music as part of the celebration of communion. In a little while, the table will hold the elements of bread and wine from which we'll share together. And I've brought it further down the church today so that we are just a little closer to the actual table, because what I'm about to share with you and with the congregation relates to the table. We begin with two readings of sacred wisdom. Firstly, from Paul's letter to the Corinthian Church, his first letter, beginning at chapter 1, verse 25. For God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. Consider your own call, brothers and sisters. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, things that are not, to abolish things that are, so that no one might boast in the presence of God. In contrast, God is why you are in Jesus Christ, who became for us wisdom from God, and righteousness and sanctification and redemption, in order that, as it is written, let the one who boasts boast in the Lord. And then from Ken Rooks, from his book Promptings and Provocations, a poem called In the Breaking of the Bread. In the breaking of bread, the Lord is known. The human-shaped God takes the hospitality of heaven in his hands and distributes it to his friends. This is for you, he says, looking into the eyes of the hungry. This food is me. Take me deep inside your eyes, your head, your heart and your belly. Take me into your dreams and your struggles, your fears and your waking thoughts. Take me deep into your cryings and your rejoicings. Take me as you journey towards the wonder of love and the mystery of grace. Find me deep within your sharings, your yearnings, your laughings, and the fullness of your life together. See me with you in the loneliness of dark night, and when you close your eyes against the brilliant light. See me even when I disappear. This is for you, he says. Jesus told stories, encouragement to imagination and inspiration, and we do likewise. For the way of God is like a table where all are welcome. Parables aren't only in the Bible. There are many parables of God's way. Just as Jesus told them in his day, I think it's important to listen for a few parables of our own in our day, and even to make up some for ourselves like he did. Today, it's the parable of the table where all are welcome. Or as Jesus might have said it, For the way of God is as if a table sits in the middle of the room, and all who come to it find a place of welcome. So I want to tell you about a particular table. I know I've told you about it before here, but that's okay. Most parables, I'm sure, are told more than once. I bet Jesus repeated the Good Samaritan. But back to the particular table. It sat in the dining kitchen room, the busiest room in a busy, crowded home. It was the first thing that people saw as they came in the back door, and no one ever used the front door. The house had a lounge room, but lots of the time people sat round the kitchen table or stood around in the kitchen. At that table, the parents and children gathered each day for the evening meal. Despite not being wealthy, there was always good food and plenty of it. And the family gave thanks, or at least listened to their dad say grace. At other times, family and visitors would sit at the table with a cup of tea or coffee, Maxwell House instant, and they'd chat about all sorts of things. As the children of the family grew older, other people squeezed around the table as well. Sometimes friends, sometimes extended family, like the nephew who lived in a university college, who wanted some decent food on the college's sausage night. Or like the girlfriend who asked in a semi-pathetic voice, "Will you please feed me?" knowing the answer would always be yes. And speaking of girlfriends, it was at that table that new girlfriends underwent the ordeal of Sunday night dinner. The dad's spaghetti made by the boilerful, or the mum's egg and bacon pie with whom knows how many eggs in it. At that table, the veteran girlfriend was once heard telling a newbie, "They don't get better, you just get used to them." If you left that table hungry, it was your own silly fault. At that table, space was limited. There was no room for elbows out wide as they wielded their cutlery. Sometimes the bigger ones would help the little ones cut up their food. Everyone had a place. Not always a lot of space, but a place. In later years, the table lost just a little of itself as the people who ate around it moved away. Although the tea and the coffee and the rock cakes were always still there whenever they came home. At that table, my family's table, I learned about hospitality. I learned about it at another table too. A bit like this one, holding bread and wine. Simple things with their own stories. A bit like the spaghetti and the egg and bacon pies. A bit like them, but different too. I learned that the bread and wine told a story of Jesus and his friends so long ago, and I gradually found my way into that story for myself. Funnily enough though, what I first learned of that table and its hospitality was that, unlike the table at home, I wasn't included. I had to watch from my seat as the adults went forward and received, until suddenly, when I was confirmed at 16, I was allowed to join in, almost as if I'd passed some kind of entry test. Perhaps that denial made it more precious when I was allowed to participate. I don't know. But I do know it made me very aware that I don't want any part of denying it to others, or insist that they had to understand it first, as if I did. I'm deeply grateful that the Uniting Church in Australia practices an open table. For the way of God is as if a table sits in the middle of the room, and all who come to it find a place of welcome. I don't know about you, but for me, this is a parable not only of hospitality, but also of the subversive nature of God's way. It speaks against the conventional wisdom present in Jesus' day and ours, the wisdom of empire, of power, of wealth, of individualism, and of competition. And it speaks against the notion that God has favourites. For God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom. God's weakness is stronger than human strength, says Paul in 1 Corinthians. We know that the table of communion was very important to Paul in his correspondence with the Corinthians. But in this particular moment, the table of Holy Communion is a parable that speaks to us of that higher foolishness. The table where people are invited and welcome without the need for credentials, without the agenda of winners and losers or thrashing out a deal. It stands against dominant views of wisdom and strength. It invites us into something much deeper. As I said, Paul had all sorts of thoughts about communion, and one of his challenges to the Corinthian church was that the rich ones were getting in there and gobbling all the food before the ones who had to work for a day could get there. He said, that's not communion. That's just having dinner. He invites his people, us, into something much deeper. Table of unity, bread of community, chalice of memory, banquet of faith. Gathered through history, gathered in mystery, God's great diversity, gathered in grace. Amen. May it be so.